Chapter 4. Claudia and Jamie woke very early the next morning. It was still dark. Their stomachs felt like tubes of toothpaste that had been all squeezed out. Giant economy-sized tubes. They had to be out of the bed and out of sight before the museum staff came on duty. Neither was accustomed to getting up so early, to feeling so unwashed, or feeling so hungry. They dressed in silence. Each felt that peculiar chill that comes from getting up in the early morning, the chill that most come from one's unknown bloodstream, for it comes in summer as well as winter, from some inside part of you that knows it is early morning. Claudia also dreaded that brief moment when her PJs were shed and her underwear was not yet on. Even before she began undressing, she always had her underwear laid out on bed in the right direction, right for getting into as quickly as possible. She did this now. But she hurried less, pulling her petticoat down over her head. She took good long whiffs of the wonderful essence of detergent and clean decron cotton, which floated down from the petticoat. Next to her any kind of elegance, Claudia loved good clean smells. After they were dressed, Claudia whispered to Jamie, "Let's stash our book bags and instrument cases before we man our stations." They agreed to scatter their belongings. Thus, if the museum officials found one thing, they wouldn't necessarily find all. While still at home, they had removed any identification on their cases as well as their clothing. Any child who has watched only 1 month's worth of television knows to do that much. Claudia hid her violin case in a sarcophagus that had no lid. It was well above eye level, and Jamie helped hoist her up so she could reach it. It was a beautifully carved Roman marble sarcophagus. She hid her book bag behind a tapestry screen in the rooms of the French furniture. Jamie wanted to hide his things in a mummy case, but Claudia said that would be unnecessarily complicated. The Egyptian wing of the Metropolitan was too far away from their bedroom. For the number of risks involved, it might as well be in Egypt. So the trumpet case was hidden inside a huge urn, and Jamie's book bag was neatly tucked behind a drape that was behind a statue from the Middle Ages. Unfortunately, the museum people had fastened all the drawers of their furniture, so they couldn't be opened. They had never given a thought to the convenience of Jamie Kincaid. Manning their stations meant climbing back into the booths and waiting until the perilous time when the museum was open to the staff, but not to visitors. They washed up, combed their hair, and even brushed their teeth. Then began those long moments. That first morning they weren't quite sure when the staff would arrive, so they hid good and early. While Claudia stood crouched down waiting, the emptiness and hollowness of all the museum corridors filled her stomach. She was starved. She spent her time trying not to remember delicious things to eat. Jamie made one slight errand that morning. It was almost enough to get caught. When he heard the sound of running water, he assumed that some male visitor was using the men's room to wash up. He checked his watch and saw that it was 10:05. He knew that the museum officially opened at 10 o'clock, so he stepped down to walk out of his booth. It was not, however, a museum visitor who had turned on the water tap. It was a janitor filling his bucket. He was leaning down in the act of wringing out his mop when he saw Jamie's legs appear from nowhere and then saw Jamie emerge. "Where did you come from?" he asked. Jamie nodded and smiled. "Mother always says that I come from heaven." He bowed politely and walked out, delighted with his brush with danger. He could hardly wait to tell Claudia. Claudia chose not to be amused on so empty a stomach. Mommy's reading. The museum restaurants wouldn't open until 11:30, and the snack bar wouldn't open until after that, so they left the museum to get breakfast. They went to the automat and used $1 worth of Bruce's nickels. Jamie allotted 10 nickels to Claudia and kept 10 for himself. Jamie bought a cheese sandwich and a coffee. After eating these, he still felt hungry and told Claudia she could have 25 more cents more for pie if she wished. Claudia had eaten cereal and drank pineapple juice, scolded him about the need to eat properly. Breakfast food for breakfast and lunch food for lunch. Jamie countered with complaints, but Claudia's narrow-mindedness. They were better organized that second day, knowing that they could not afford more than 2 meals a day. They stopped at a grocery store and bought a small package of peanut butter crackers for the night. They hid them in various pockets in their clothing. They decided to join a school group for lunch at the snack bar. There was certainly enough to choose from. That way their faces would always be part of a crowd. Upon their return to the museum, Claudia informed Jamie that they should take advantage of the wonderful opportunity they had to learn and to study. No other children in the world, since the world began, had this opportunity. So she set forth for herself and for her brother the task of learning everything about the museum, one thing at a time. Claudia didn't probably didn't realize that the museum has over 365,000 works of art. Even if she had, she could not have been convinced that learning everything about everything was not possible. Her ambitions were as enormous and multi-directional as the museum itself. Every day they would pick a different gallery about which they would learn everything. He could pick first, she would pick second, he third, and so on. Just like the television schedule at home. Jamie considered learning something every day outrageous. It was not only outrageous, it was unnecessary. Claudia simply did not know how to escape. He thought he would put a quick end to this part of their runaway career. She chose the galleries of the Italian Renaissance. He didn't even know what the Renaissance was, except that it sounded important, and there seemed to be an awful lot of it. He figured that Claudia would give up in despair.